Hello everyone, Gemma from Fountain here, and I'm here today to catch up with Jake over in Fountain, North America about the recent Hero conference that we both attended. So first of all, shall we chat about the top things that we learned from the conference? I don't know if you want to go first, I don't mind.
Yeah, sure. I can't believe it was already a month ago, hey? Time flies when you're really, really busy. Yeah, I mean, there was loads of interesting takeaways. I found in general, what the conference did was either validate, when we're seeing like the world's leading experts in specific areas and they're saying, hey, you should do it like this, and we're doing it like that. That's great. It's a really positive validation. And then there were definitely some areas where also there was I felt there was quite a lot of learning that I had. So specifically, I think AJ's talk on LinkedIn ads was really, really helpful. Although, as I say, a lot of it was validation. It's like, yes, that's what we're doing. And then some of the ideas that he has that kind of run counter to what LinkedIn's advice might be. Things in terms of, for example, LinkedIn will always recommend keep your audiences quite big and quite broad, whereas he takes a very granular approach. I thought that was very interesting. Stuff around bidding and basically ignoring their suggested bid and going as low as you can. Again, that's sort of normally what we do. I normally go a little bit low, but he was like, yeah, go bargain basement where you can. So I thought that was really interesting. Another talk that was great, and the guy did really, really well, given that he had a major tech issue at the beginning. So essentially a lot of his presentation wasn't working. So he had to kind of wing it a little bit, but that was Corey Henke, I think I'm pronouncing it right, who talked about YouTube ads and the YouTube ad ecosystem. And again, because his agency really just focuses on YouTube, they have some pretty significant budgets, and talking about sort of multivariate testing between audiences, creative, all of that kind of stuff, I thought was really, really fascinating. Then the other talk that I really, really liked was Jeremy Hull from Brain Labs talking about automation and smart search. And there was some good ones in there, looking at how he, when he's talking to vendors about AI and machine learning and sort of trying to figure out, is it actually AI or is it just sort of vaguely algorithmically driven? So those are the three. I mean, all of the talks are really good. I didn't attend a Duff talk while I was there. All the speakers were great, but those are the three that stood out to me.
Cool. No, that is really interesting, because we went to different talks in order of maximising what we got out of it. But the one that I really enjoyed, I think, was a talk, and I can't remember who it was by, but it was a talk around audiences. So it was using the custom audience feature in Google Ads and how you can build and layer them, and how you can build really, really specific targeted audiences, and the ideas around that, and actually not just using, say, similar to in Google, which isn't really ever that great in terms of performance, and they don't really rate it that high, but layering it with other stuff on top with the combined audiences, I thought that was all really clever. And especially bearing in mind that a lot of our clients are well, not a lot, but like every business, I'm sure that there are quite a lot of people who have quite specific audiences and quite specific needs. I thought there are some really good applications that we can use there, and I thought that was really exciting. I think the other talk that I really liked was around how you measure top of funnel, so how you measure brand awareness campaigns. And again, it's just thinking about things in a slightly different way. In some ways, what was said wasn't massively revolutionary. It's more it's just fresh ideas, isn't it? And I think it's just the way that you can look at UTMs and just some of the stuff that they were doing. I thought was really exciting and really interesting. So I mean, that was and I think that was Paid Media Pros. So I mean, I think it was Michelle from Paid Media Pros that had that one. But it was really, really interesting to think about how you can tie it all together and how you can measure it, which I thought was really, 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 really good. And lastly, I think there were a couple of talks. One was, I think, David Green. Another one was the lady who runs her own agency. And again, I'm terrible with names, so I can't remember. But they both talked about conversion rate optimization and lifetime value. And there was a lot of talk around that. I think it was the biggest message that I got was thinking about understanding what didn't work. And sometimes if you've got a really strong hypothesis, and you have tested something and it didn't work, is don't just abandon it. Actually go back and think about why, and whether it was the interpretation of the hypothesis that was flawed rather than the hypothesis itself, which sounds such a basic thing, but it's a really, really important point, and one that I think we all sometimes focus so much in on why it didn't work. Sometimes the glaringly obvious reason might be because you didn't do a very good job of interpreting the hypothesis in the first place, or your design or whatever wasn't right. Or I think that's a really, really valid point, and I think that was really interesting. So, who impressed you the most? So, what business or person impressed you the most when you were there?
So I made lots of different friends. I enjoyed speaking to Gary Galloway at 𝙁𝙤𝙪𝙣𝙪. He's a really nice chap, and I thought his talk was great. He actually sort of moonlights as a stand-up comedian, so he's pretty funny. So that was a good one. I'll go back to AJ, as I say, I do a lot of LinkedIn work, and so that for me stood out. And I really did I thought Jeremy from Brain Labs as well, very, very good speaker indeed. And there was sort of quite a lot to learn. And it was just funny that he had titled his talk the same title as I'd titled a blog that I wrote last year. So that kind of just set him in my good books from the get-go. How about you?
Well, to be honest, I don't think it's really a person per se, because everybody impressed me. And that sounds really cliche. Like you said,
no, but there were lots of smart people.
So many people. Yeah, I spoke to so many people. What really impressed me the most was the level of engagement. I think that is what impressed me. I loved the fact that every single talk I attended, no matter how many people were there, people had questions. People were so engaged and so keen to understand and learn. And I thought that was, which I appreciate when you've paid to go to a conference. Maybe that isn't that weird, but I was actually really refreshing. And I liked the fact that people were challenging. So for me, it wasn't really one particular person that impressed me the most. I think it was just the whole kind of ethos and the whole approach to the event that really impressed me. And I really enjoyed that as well, because, when we did our talk, people actually were engaged and they asked questions, and it's really nice. So yeah,
I'm still getting questions now. I had a chat with somebody last week who wanted to clarify some stuff around it, which was pretty awesome. So
that's really cool. So I think that was really and did anything shock you at the event, in a positive way? Did anything kind of come up that you thought was really
positive? I'm on the fence, but I thought the talk from Facebook, now Meta, around the metaverse was so for me, and obviously it's fascinating what's going to happen with that. And then what quite interests me is that sort of this idea, how sometimes people think their phone is listening to them because they get served a very specific Facebook ad. And she almost sort of spoke about that a little bit in terms of using the metaverse. Will we be able to capture people and sell them stuff before they even know they want to buy it? Which for me is sort of slightly disconcerting, but kind of as a marketer, quite interesting as well. So I think that area, which, I don't think we've had that much of a chance to play around with it yet, but that is a really fascinating one.
Yeah, and I thought off the back of that, I completely agree with that, actually. And it probably was the most shocking one, like you said, or the one that was the most future thinking, wasn't it? So, but naturally, therefore, the most shocking. But I also thought with that, and I know it's a small thing, but the talk of augmented reality ads, so AR ads, that was quite crazy to think that you'll be able to create AR ads.
Sorry, you're going to have to go and see Mum, buddy. I'm just recording something. Sorry. So the AR and VR ads,
because and having a tool to be able to create your own, this year, I mean, that's kind of crazy. I was talking to someone about it. Maybe it was last week, and it's just mad to think that that'll be, in the not too distant future, these will just be accepted things that everybody will be doing. And it's just mad to think the progress we've come, and I just, I mean, it's all very cliche, but like you said, the metaverse, I mean, that whole sentiment of buying something before you even know you want it, just mad. Yeah, and like you said, that balance between being excited about being a marketer and also sort of thinking a little bit like that's a bit scary, isn't it? But though I felt a bit like that was a weird dynamic, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think the sort of management and regulation around it will be really, really important. I mean, they're already struggling a little bit in the metaverse with sort of online behaviors and stuff like that. And I think something else that stood out from that talk was, she had a picture of her kid sort of sitting in his, VR headset and his Oculus or whatever. And, I know I already think about Coop and how much time he gets to, how much screen time he gets, especially coming out of the pandemic. And, is that, I think it's inevitable. And I think the technology will improve so that we're not necessarily having to wear a big old headset, but perhaps that sort of combination between sort of, the augmented reality where actually you're still part of the real world, but we're using technology to sort of augment and make life easier in specific areas. That I find quite exciting. But the idea of just sort of being cut off and living in an entirely separate universe, I mean, it's cool in some ways, like it sort of goes back to a lot of sci-fi novels that I've read, but at the same time, I kind of like the real world too.
Well, I was thinking the same thing, like the idea of not visiting a place and just visiting it virtually, that raises some real questions, doesn't it, around and meeting your friends virtually. I mean, gamers are already doing this. I mean, it sounds like it's like a whole different world, but of course, if you're a gamer, then you're kind of already doing all this stuff in some form or other, and have been for quite some time. So it's interesting. But just because you're a gamer and you like meeting people virtually, it doesn't mean that you never meet people in actual person. Or so I mean, there is a but like you said, the regulation around it and the way that that's going to change, I think, will be really interesting. And whether people try and avoid the same mistakes that you made over the measurement of people in the current online space, I think, that whole side of things is really, really fascinating. And obviously the next, one thing that I did find interesting actually is, not just on a side note, no one really, and this is the reason that I wanted to talk about it at Hero Conference in London, which is in July, FYI, is nobody really talked about measurement. Nobody really talked about the fact that it's changing. And I don't know whether that's because of GDPR in Europe and whether we're more exposed to people opting out of cookies and whether that's more of a hot topic here. I was thinking there's privacy regulations in the US, it's not a thing. I mean, it's the deprecation of third-party cookies is in Chrome is going to happen everywhere. It's not just a European thing. I found it interesting that wasn't really covered, and there's a lot of conversion modeling and stuff that we've got to learn and understand. I mean, I don't fully know all of it because you never do, but it was interesting that wasn't really talked about, and that's probably one of our biggest things, isn't it? Burying our head in the sand. Tell you what I found. I don't know. It's interesting.
I did see it sort of, I think like a lot more talk was around automation throughout the conference. There was a lot about, hey, you're not going to have your ETAs anymore. It's all going to be RSAs. And I thought that was quite interesting. And, I think everybody's sort of under the same thinking that essentially we're going to have to get better at managing automation and utilizing what the Google and Facebook gods are giving us. The only real sort of allusion to the measurement and the sort of tracking apocalypse that is coming was a couple of people saying, well, hey, nobody has quite figured this out yet. And I'm not even sure, in terms of sort of knowing exactly what to do. I mean, I think, you're pretty brave doing your talk, and covering some of these things at the upcoming event in London because, there aren't enough people talking about it, and we don't all know everything. And it is, the other thing around it is it's pretty technical, right? Even though as performance marketers, most of us are more technical than your average bear. At the same time, even for us, I find it really hard to get my head around some of these concepts. And so, I mean, good on you for going to do that. And I think you'll probably have a very interesting time with it as well. And you'll probably get a lot of interesting questions. And maybe even, I think it needs to be an area where we just sort of collaborate. We don't know what those best practices are going to be yet, right?
No, definitely not. And I think I've just written an article about this actually. But it kind of makes me feel a bit like this push for electric cars, which I mean is a whole nother topic. But I'm a big Formula One fan, and they've started to introduce biofuel in Formula One. And while we're not all going to drive around in F1 cars because that would just be stupid, it does make me wonder, if we've got the infrastructure for biofuel, why are we not going down that route? Why are like the airlines of this world not pushing for that, bearing in mind the situation that we're in. And I feel like that's the situation we're in with measurement and tracking. There was a point to what I was saying, I promise. Everyone's going down the conversion modeling route. So everyone's kind of, a lot of the ad platforms and the analytics platforms, they're going down this route where they're basically looking at the people who opt to be measured, and lots of other signals, and then they're modeling what could have happened with the people that have said, I don't want to be tracked, and all the other kind of holes in things. And obviously that's, there are some questions around that, like how good is it? And how flawed is it? Is it accurate? All that kind of stuff. And I mean, we're still learning. I'm learning like everyone else. And it does kind of raise the question, like there are alternatives, like Meta and Mozilla have proposed an alternative involving like match keys. Basically, it'd be tracking, but you couldn't use it to then like target afterwards. Like it's kind of different. So you'd understand the impact of your campaigns, but then you just can't do creepy tracking audience stuff with it afterwards, which is kind of good for. It's a compromise, let's put it that way. So there are some other solutions out there, and I just, like I said, I feel like it's akin to the push with electric cars, even though a lot of electricity is still generated in using fossil fuels and stuff. So obviously, kind of doesn't make sense until we've sorted that out and the infrastructure out for all of that. So yeah, I hence why to me, it's like we're at the point of Blu-ray and DVD, and I don't know if and obviously everyone was like, oh, or HD or whatever it was, and obviously we ended up going down the Blu-ray route. It's kind of there for me at the moment, and we're at a bit of a crossroads. So yeah, I'm despite my environmental feelings about that sort of stuff, I feel like that's the crossroads we're at, and it'll be really interesting to see what happens and which route people go down. And it's an interesting one.
I didn't know about the Mozilla and Meta potential solution, which sounds like really sensible, right? Because it takes away all the creepy stuff, but still enables us. I mean, honestly, I don't think your average Joe in the street could care less about whether or not we're able to measure the success of our marketing campaigns. But then, when they start getting really, really random ads instead of really relevant ads on the internet, maybe they'll be like, oh, okay. But I guess we need to wait and see.
That's the thing. It's hard to, in some ways, it's hard to know how users are going to react to it and will it actually impact them. But of course, you might start to see different types of campaigns and people go more down the branding route, and people invest more heavily in raising brand awareness so that they can, you might find that the types of campaigns people are exposed to are very different. But I'll send you the article that I read because I thought it was really interesting. And there is quite a lot around that. So I think the solutions that we're being exposed to at the moment aren't necessarily the only solution. And I think that's a really interesting thing to remember. So, that's that really. Is there anything else you wanted to share about the conference, or anything else that you felt was really, really useful? Or do you feel like we've kind of covered it all?
I think we've covered it pretty well. Do we need to give another plug to you speaking? So when are you speaking in London?
It's in July. It's on the, oh God, I don't even know the date. That's terrible. It's in July because it got moved. So let me just check the date. Okay. Chris is editing this. I'm sure he'll love the fact that I've forgotten the date. There we are. I'm not sure which day the conference is on, the 18th and the 19th of July. It's in London. And I'll be talking about the unsexy side of PPC, measurement and tracking. Which is obviously very exciting. So no, I'm really excited about it. Like I say, lots to talk about. I'm sure there'll be lots more to talk about by the time I actually do the talk in July, because obviously loads of stuff will have changed. And hopefully I'll have a bit more concrete information to share with everyone by then as well. So 17th, 18th, and I can't even say it, 17th and 18th of July in London. Catch me talking about measurement and tracking.